Welcome everybody to the 29th season of Word Thursdays at Bright Hill Press and Literary Center of the Catskills in Treadwell, New York. We're so excited to welcome everybody this evening. It's a gorgeous summer night, about to thunderstorm here in Treadwell, so if we lose power, we'll see you another night. We have a really beautiful program for you this evening. The open mic is filled with literary geniuses, and I do not say that lightly. Mark Blickley, reading tonight from Long Island City, originally from the Bronx, and Sue Yates, reading tonight from Oneonta, New York. And Sue, is it Hawaii that you are originally from?
Well, no, not originally. I was originally born in Buffalo, which I tend to forget for obvious reasons.
Sue Yates is joining us. She's opening our open mic tonight. Our feature this evening is Nandini Bhattacharya, reading from Texas tonight. Super excited to hear her read. And we have our Dominique Wheeler at the helm of all controls. Thank you, Dominique, from New Hampshire. My name is Beatrice. I don't know if I said that yet, but I'll say it again. I'm the executive director here at Bright Hill. And I just want to say a huge thank you to New York State Council on the Arts for all that you do to support our programs, and to our board of directors. Everybody go to brighthillpress.org for all of our workshop offerings this summer. Sue Yates, who is opening our open mic tonight, is teaching a comedy writing workshop called So You Think You're Funny, Let's Write It, in August. And she's awesome and fun. And so check it out, guys. And you can decide if you think she's a good writer or not after she reads, which it's going to be yes. And finally, Dominique is going to post our virtual donation link. Usually we would charge you $3 at the door. Thank you so much for donating what you can to keep our programs going. So without further ado, Sue Yates will open the open mic tonight. Welcome, Sue.
Hello, I'm an open mic. Well, I have a piece tonight that I wrote 5 years ago, approximately, and I was living in Hawaii then. I did live there for many years. You know, I'm not as dumb as I look. So, and I did, while I was there, there's one thing that happens. Of course, I aged while I was there. And when you live in Hawaii, when women get to be a certain age, the tradition is that everybody starts calling you auntie. And so it's supposed to be a compliment, but it really set my teeth on edge, you know. So this piece was written about that, and I read it at a huge spoken word event that's held every month in Honolulu. And it's led by this wonderful young man named Kealoha, who is the poet laureate for Hawaii. He has long hair. He's just a brilliant, wonderful person. The audience is the best, and it's a young audience. So I purposely wrote this kind of with them in mind, just to jab them a little bit, and it worked. Mind you, I wrote this 5 years ago. So I call, and it's got like two parts to it. I have, in another voice, I'm going to read a comment that represents what I hear a lot from people. And then I'm going to give the response that I either say out loud or think in my head. Okay, so here we go. It's called Rage Against My Age. Okay. Hey, Auntie, you want help with that? Oh my God, he just called me Auntie. He can still tell I'm young, can't he? The shape of my skin is not a measure of who I am within. I hate that word, Auntie. My clothes may not be scanty, my hair may be thin, and yes, I have wrinkles under my chin, but I can still drop you like a pin. I'm sorry, but we were looking for somebody a little younger. Don't you know I have shattered glass ceilings, and you have just hurt my feelings? I had to put up with so much sexual harassment, not even Bill Cosby could make a dent. I made it possible for women like Hillary. How dare you put me in a pillory? Would you like the senior discount? Why, you little bitch. I'd like to scratch you like an itch. I will have you know there's no place I didn't go. You're looking at a body of knowledge. Hell, I was working before you even went to college. Ooh, Mom, you're too old for that. You little snot. Don't you know we practically invented smoking pot? I mean, I was in a daze when I heard Jimi Hendrix play Purple Haze. Led Zeppelin was still climbing the stairway to heaven when I saw cities burning in '67. I am still younger than springtime and full of laughter. So why pay attention to all the years that came after? Are you sure you can handle all this change at your age? Honey, change is all I know. Without it, you don't grow. Experience in life has no substitute. Without it, you have no horn to toot. I lived before the computer and the cell phone, before we were killing others with a drone. I had sex before there was AIDS, and white Southerners still had black maids. And yes, I did rejoice because I lived before there was choice. So I may be 64, but there's still so much more in store. I have lived a full life before, and I'm not stopping now because there's still so much more. That's it.
Sue, thank you so much. That was absolutely delightful. So you guys, I'm going to introduce Mark Blickley next, or Blick as I've called him for many, many years. I took a workshop with Blick back in 2010. That's how I met him in Brooklyn in my little beautiful rent stabilized apartment that I let go, and I don't know why. But he's been a dear friend since. He's been here to read at Bright Hill, and he's a truly, truly wonderful writer. Welcome, Mark Blickley.
Hi, Sue. I just want to say it's Tom Waits has a line in one of his songs. You must have been reading my mail. Everything you said, I had my own particular flashback on, so it was great. I really like that. Okay, well, I'm going to read an Ephacaris fiction piece. Ephacaris is when you do creative writing based on an image, and it just came out. The anthology just came out yesterday. Just got it yesterday, and so I'd like to show you the image that this story, which is called Route 66, is based on. It's a sculpture by Texan sculptor Belinda Suberman. And her sculpture is called Tree Root People. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yep, we can see it. Yep.
All right. Okay. So based on this, I came up with this story called Route 66. When I was alive, my favorite joke to tell was the one about the woman who was arrested at a cemetery for peeing in public on her husband's grave. When the arresting cop said she must have really hated him, the woman was shocked. Hate him? I was crazy about him. I'm just crying from the place I miss him most. Yeah, I know, the joke's vulgar and silly, but guess what? It always cracks me up when telling it. And truth be told, most people at least giggle, if not outright belly laugh. So if it offends you, get over it. My name's Craig Luzinski, and I recently died at age 66 of what my liberal lesbian daughter calls Covfefe 19. There's always a smart ass, but I don't blame my president. I blame China. Both my parents died at 66, though 4 years apart. Who's to say I wouldn't have bit the big one at age 66 anyway? I did have diabetes. To quote my favorite president about the hundreds of thousands of recent American deaths, it is what it is. Not wearing a mask or social distancing didn't kill me. It was my heartbreak over the loss of my God-given right to protest those fascist restrictions that did me in. I am honored to have my favorite leader's signature on my presidential memorial certificate. issued by the sitting commander-in-chief to all veterans who died with an honorable discharge. God knows what my lefty daughter will do with that noble document. Hope he won re-election. I'm a Navy veteran with 3 years submarine service. I earned my dolphins and am proud to be called a bubblehead, the Navy nickname for sailors who serve on underwater boats. My wish was to be buried in a national veteran cemetery, lying in proud solidarity with my military brothers. Although I don't have much use for those Air Force vets who consider themselves as military. Most of them were just a bunch of wusses, except for the combat pilots. Or if not planted in a military cemetery, I wanted to be cremated, the VA pays, with burial at sea, a proper end for a Cold War warrior. Neither of my requests were honored. Here's a tip for those of you still walking above ground. Avoid seriously pissing off your kids for long swatches of time. I was estranged from 3 of my 4 kids, and as luck would have it, the only child who would continue to have contact with me was my self-proclaimed progressive youngest child, Zoe. I have her to thank for the horrible place I am in today. I can only dream of being buried in a proper graveyard where anyone who feels the need could piss on my grave if they want. I learned in the Navy that urine is sterile. Every night the news would run sob stories about how all we Kung flu victims on respirators have to die alone without the comfort of family beside them. For Christ's sakes, we're all born alone, we all die alone, suck it up. Who needs a bunch of loved ones crowding around your bed, walking down out at you as you rattle out a final breath and lose control of your bowels? Give me a break. They pay people to clean up that kind of mess. Zoe and her angry, what she calls wife, would often visit and argue current events with me. I think I did an admirable job defending myself, as I usually stormed out of my apartment, speechless. I may have won those battles with Zoe and her girlfriend, but damned if they didn't win the war. My environmentally zealot daughter is turning me into a tree. And believe me, it couldn't be further from a green piece. It's humiliating. Zoe had me stuffed into this biodegradable plastic pod that looks like a giant egg. To fit me inside, I was placed into a fetal position. You believe that? A powerful, manly person like me going out like some helpless, naked baby? Hope she's enjoying her last laugh at my expense. Here's her plan. As my burial pod disintegrates, the surrounding soil gets nutrients from my decaying body, and the tree sapling they planted above me begins to take root. I'm so lucky to have died in one of the 33 states that allows this burial mockery of patriotic, God-fearing men like me who serve this nation. I went from a proud former first-class petty officer to a goddamn eternal tree hugger. I must be planted in some kind of left-wing pod forest cemetery because there are a bunch of other people down here and we're all connected at some sort of crowded, twisted network. Most of them look like brown and beige freaks, but some of the women are still pretty hot, though I could do without the smell of our evaporating gases. In a weird way, it reminds me of being close-quartered in a below-ground submarine. A pleasant surprise is how really sweet it can get down here, an added treat for a former diabetic. Every root pumps out a sugar hormone into other roots that often feels me feeling like a young sailor on shore leave. I did get upset at first when other guys were pumping me full of sugar, and not just the ladies, but it's executed with such organized harmony, I can't help but admire its military-like precision. Sue me. Don't get me wrong. This place is no hippy-dippy paradise like my daughter probably believes it to be. Actually, Zoe's not such a bad kid. She's just mixed up. I don't really buy that she buried me in a fetal position to humiliate me. She probably figured it was something joyful. I used to get tired of always asking me, Pops, don't you feel any joy or passion? What gets you excited or curious? I told her I haven't felt any of those things since her mother died. When I was a young sailor, I used to eat magic mushrooms with my buddies. I liked them very much, especially all the intense, colorful visions during sex. But the fungi down here, that's what they like to be called, these mushrooms are truly magical. In between my sugar rushes, I get crackling jolts of electricity from this internet of shrooms. These flashes of energy pinpoint exactly how we're feeling. Trust me, it's not euphoria and bliss pulsing in and out of my body. It's most often a melting anger alongside cackling surges of fear. We are all wired and uncertain, yet none of us are alone. Okay, that's it.
Blick, thank you so much. I know you hate Zoom, and it means so much to me that you came on tonight to read for us.
I'd do anything for you, Beatrice. You're one of the greatest people I've ever met, all right?
Blick is also mentor to my young 5-year-old son, creative mentor. So
No,
thank you, Blick.
her young son, I collaborated. I should have brought them up. They're in books, published books.
Published books.
I did 2 Fracas pieces with her son, Charlie, right? One was he took a photograph of his mother doing, what do you call that?
Aerial yoga.
Aerial yoga in the backyard. And then there was another picture of Charlie in a windowsill. So it's not, I'm not a mentor to him. He is my collaborator and peer. All right?
Wow. Thank you, Blick. Thank you so, so much. I am thrilled to introduce to everybody our feature tonight, Nandini Bhattacharya. I'm going to share Nandini's bio with you. Nandini was born and raised in India and has called the United States her second continent for the last 30 years. Love's Garden, published in 2020, is her first novel and a work of women's historical fiction in a tumultuous 20th century India. Her work has been published or will be in the Saturday Evening Post, the Bombay Review, the Bangalore Review, Storyscape Journal, and more. She has attended the Bread Loaf Writers Workshop and been accepted for residencies at the Vermont Studio Center. She was first runner-up for the Los Angeles Review Flash Fiction Contest, longlisted for the Disquiet International Literary Prize in 2019 and 2020, and received honorable mention for the Saturday Evening Post Great American Stories Contest 2021. She's currently working on a second novel about love, minorities, racism, and Hindutva politics in India and xenophobic mentalities and other mysteries in Donald Trump's America, titled Homeland Blues. She lives outside Houston, Texas, and teaches English Lit and writing at Texas A&M University. Welcome, Nandini. Go ahead and unmute and start over if you could.
Absolutely. Sorry, I've been Zooming all day because I've been in a virtual residency, so I'm not sure why that happened. But I am very, very delighted to be here, and I'm having a little anxiety about following up on the poets and the wits, because my novel is probably going to at least seem like a downer. Anyway, it's about a little bit about women navigating war, and largely set in 20th century India during the time that India is also struggling to be independent from the British. So I think without further ado, I'm just going to read some passages, and it's also a multi-generational novel, so there'll be a few generations of women characters. I'll try and cue that as best I can, but if not, just ask me questions if there's time later. So here goes from Love's Garden, and it begins in 1898 with the story of the woman, sort of the matriarch who begins this whole rigmarole, jing-bang. Part 1, The Village, 1898, in chapter 1. In the year 1898, in a corner of Britain's far-flung empire where the imperial sun is still rampant, a train snakes through a vast plain checkered by bronze, green, and ochre fields of wheat, corn, and millet. A woman stumbles through the train, passing compartments, peering into some, trying to reach the engine at the front. Her name is Saroj, and she wants to stop the train. And get off. How can this be happening? Why hasn't Munia come? She promised she would come without fail. Munia knows the stakes. She swore on her honor and her love. People are sleeping, seated, slumped, stretched out, some with their entire bodies and heads covered with makeshift sheets, others in ugly positions that bring no shame, only to the utterly oblivious. The train is completely dark. Here and there, Saroj hears a moan, a whimper, even a low droning. Is that an infant crying, though? Saroj freezes for a long second. No, it's a little girl who has fallen off a bunk. She is lying sprawled on the dirty floor, sobbing as if getting up without her mother's remorseful help is out of the question. Saroj can't wait, can't stop, can't step into the compartment and help her up. No time to lose. Saroj lurches on forward. The engine shrieks again and again as it shreds the night. Saroj begins to think she will not be able to reach that engine compartment where the driver and the stoker are busy urging on the machine like a trained beast. Her legs are giving way. The spirit billows out of her like smoke from an extinguished fire. All is burning. All has burned. She should have burned too. It was her fate. But she erred. She sinned. Had she sinned? Had she erred? The old agony of that dilemma stops her as if someone has just punched her in the gut. She doesn't even try to break her fall to the floor. On the gritty floor of the snaking train, taking her away from everything she has ever known or loved, Saroj dies that night inside. So from that beginning of the novel, I want to move on to a bit about the story of Saroj's daughter, Prem. And this is jumping from 1898 to 1916. And it's happening in Calcutta, which was actually the capital of British India until it moved to New Delhi, but was a kind of immense fairy tale metropolis for a very long time. Anyway, chapter 8. It's almost the end of 1916. The Great War blazes fiercer than ever. Indian soldiers conduct themselves heroically, fighting and dying prodigiously for the empire. Prem has been married for over a year. Prem knows fairly well now that she doesn't love her husband. She frets and indeed mourns that she probably won't wake up one day loving him or even liking him. But what's hardening now, like the sun-baked clay of village summers, is a faint clotting insight. It seems love can't be automatically grown and harvested from any soil and any seed. Prem had guessed, now she is positive. Again and again, she remembers her parents, Babuji's joylessness, Maiji's lovelessness. But she'd always pulled in the opposite direction from Maiji. She wants to, needs to love. She doesn't want to live like a wraith as her mother does. She wants to live all the seasons of her life in their prime. That's why she made up her mind to bury every last thing of the past in the crypt of stolen time and try again. And so it almost broke her spirit and did break her heart when she discovered after marriage that she didn't understand her husband, didn't know how or if she could love him. It isn't an entire surprise. Some part of her is dead already. She's already betrayed herself. And yet, the failure of a second affection, or at least a convergence of inclinations, to arise in her marriage to Sir Narain Mitter, this is her husband, is a dizzying blow. She does not think it's better this way, unlike her mother. As to little Nadu, as Sir Narain was once known in his family, He knew early on that since they had no land, the 1905 partition of Bengal uprooted his family and brought them to Kolikata from Pabna in what later became Bangladesh. He had nothing solid to hold on to and grow upon, that his fortune would have to come from thin air. It did. Rumors, promissory notes, insufficiently shredded, a drunken Englishman's delirious ravings about bribable factory managers, a jute mill deliberately burned down by the owner for insurance compensation. Of such gold chips of information, little Naru made the foundations of his fortune. He's poured it all into solid things that don't melt into thin air. He supplies materials for the British Empire's barracks, railroad tracks, bridges, and new hotels, especially hotels, in only a few of which brown sahibs like him are allowed. Yet, partly as a result of dizzying commercial pirouettes by him and his sort of men, a few million people have died in small and big famines. But this son of former refugees, unlike village wags, has no patience with beggars and losers. Indians, he says frequently, scampering and squealing rascals, piling together like rats, like they say the Jews do in Europe. Sir Norian isn't one of those Jew-like Indians. After all, though he can't enter its social clubs and hotels, the empire has knighted him for his ample services and keen loyalty to the master race. What more? Sir Norian Mitter is a pragmatic man who holds steady. He neither sides with the anti-colonial nationalists, whom he personally considers maniacs, nor does he openly abase himself before his white masters too much. Very few self-made men of empire have pulled this off, but Sir Norian's impenetrable blondeur has preserved him. Of course, one day this great man needed a wife, and he found one in the provinces. Now that he has married, his wife's expected and indeed required immaculate social éclat will also be requisitioned to keep the family in the foothills of the British Empire. Of this, Prem, now Lady Mitter, has been made aware. So this is a little anatomy of the marriage of a much younger and somewhat romantic woman to an older and unromantic man of commerce who's also a lackey of the British. The next section is moving us the great distance of 1 year from 1916 to 1917, but the Great War is still going on. Actually, I start when the Great War finally ends. Some months later, Prem acquires another child, a girl this time. The back story is that she had a village friend, and the unresolved relationship with that village friend is some of what forms the backbone of the entire novel. And this girl, the young girl who's going to show up, is actually the daughter of her village friend who died in childbirth. Prem will remember how old the girl was when she came to Mitter Mansion because she knows when the girl was born. The little girl won't remember. She was never told her date of birth unless it was the one day in the year of especial gloom and unusually excessive mistreatment of her. But the girl, though only 6, will remember her arrival at Mitter Mansion. Among other reasons, because after that, the voice of her grandmother will cease to squawk. You were born cursed. You'll swallow alive everyone wherever you go. Her 60-year-old grandmother has a broken heart that stalks around outside her ribcage in the shape of her only child, the girl's father. The girl rarely sees her father except when he's drunk and beats her silly, or goes after his mother if the girl has scuttled deep enough away under the bed she shares with the old woman. The girl will also remember her father peeking through the iron flourishes of the great closed gate at the rearing colonnades of Midder Mansion, gripping her hand as though she might escape, as he has raised her, so to speak, also by the hand. He's a man in the shape of an inverted question mark, a concave bracket sprouting a horsey face on the thin stem of an unexpected turkey gobble neck. He smokes cheap beedies, a ghostly pair they must seem to passers-by. He doesn't talk. The girl has no words at all, only eyes. She is tiny, has a bushy head of hair almost half as big as the rest of her. The squat keeper who stopped them at the gate scurries back from the mansion. Permission has been given to enter. That day, by chance, Prem and Sir Midder are presiding together over the grand scene of their sumptuous union in the drawing room. It's a classic state appearance. The young woman, untimely blasted by the early frost of joyless marriage, and the much older man preserved by self-important title to a young and beautiful woman, joyless or not. A painful thing to see. Even the servants look coldly, eyes hooded upon the couple. When the girl and her father walk into that dizzyingly grand drawing room with two living deities in it, the girl feels wearily prescient, as if she has an ancient intuition. She keeps her eyes on the floor, knowing everything and everyone here will want to shame and mortify her. She sees an important-looking and unnaturally erect man and a beautiful, expressionless woman sitting on separate golden armchairs with red velvet seats and backs. Her father tells her to bend low, to touch their feet, to show respect to Lord and Lady Midder. She creeps as close as she dares, shooting a glance up to see if the Lord and Lady are expressing outrage. They are not. About a foot away from their forefeet, she touches the gleaming floor and brings her fingertips up to her head to receive the dust of those important feet. She goes through this terrifying ritual not because she wants to obey or please her father, but because she thinks it's safer to stay on the good side of these two enthroned people who look like the tiny gods and goddesses on miniature gilt thrones in Hindu prayer rooms and alcoves, known for being both bored and turned on by human misery. I don't know how much time I have. I'm just going to read a bit more if we have time for that. Okay, so that's the time when our Lady Midder adopts the young daughter of her dead friend. Moving on to something about her life, the daughter's life, the young girl's life in the great mansion of the Lord and Lady Midder. And once again, we have skipped 2 whole years to 1919, but the war is now, as we all know, over. Chapter 23. Since Dai's death, and Dai is her old nanny who dies, the village comes back more and more to Prem. Sometimes she even allows Kanon, this is her old friend, the young woman who died in childbirth, to drift into focus momentarily, dares to, for a moment. Her hands twitch then on her satiny lap, needing something to do, and she goes to the bioscope. One new bioscope company is coming into great prominence, the J.F. Hirawala Theatre Company, which makes superb mythologicals with astoundingly all-enduring heroines that make Prem cry almost as much as she wept, at Thai's stories when she was a young girl. Unfortunately, Roma is the name of the young girl that she adopts, but she renames her Roma, which is a kind of urban name that really doesn't suit the girl. Roma has now taken to skulking in shadows and corners, hiding behind maids and servants. She eats like a bird and hardly speaks. She is thin and looks peaked. The greenish hue around her mouth that she came with is still there. Prem notices, and she feels both panic and despair. Kanan's daughter has shown nothing of Kanan's obliging nature. Prem doesn't even realize that sometimes Roma stands right outside the door of the blindingly lit drawing room where Sir and Lady Noreen Mitter are giving a grand party, pressing her face against the figured glass doors, imagining the horror her crushed nose and bulging eyes might create in there if someone sees her. Roma watches her exhalations turn people into ghostly blurs. Or she stands silently in a corner of the great room, forced to be fashionably frocked and be-ribboned, her unwilling shape a familiar heavy shadow on Prem's heart, straining to be light on these occasions of gaiety. Of course, in public, Prem's poise and panache don't skip a beat. Alone, though, some days she asks herself, why? Why doesn't she love me? What am I doing wrong? Moving on then to another more political moment in 1919. So Roma is still there and the household is going on the way it does. In April 1919, children and peons face a reckoning. The British haven't kept their word about giving Indians home rule status after the First Great War. So the British had promised India independence or something like it if they had helped them in the war, which of course they did. But then, surprise, surprise, the British said, sorry, we didn't really mean that. Next day, Sir Noreen froths at the furious reports in the local newspapers. Indians who died fighting for the Raj in the Great War? Riffraff, village idiots, gadabouts. What if 1,000,000 of them died? Sir Noreen rails. Everybody knows that the Indian veterans of the war were hardly given a welcome, leave alone a hero's welcome. But that's the fault of the nationalists too. Their antics have drawn people's attention away from the godforsaken soldiers. There are millions and millions more to take their place. This is a country of peons and children. And since when have peons and children acquired the right to rule? That's Sir Noreen. Gandhi, with his mad ideas about non-cooperation and civil disobedience, is just creating cannon fodder and only one thing can come of it, etc., etc., etc. Perhaps the empire is in accord with Sir Noreen's population control theories. News spreads that the English colonel, Reginald Dyer, ordered firing on thousands of peaceful protesters. This used to happen 100 years ago as well. In Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar, a day ago, hundreds of men, women, and children tried their desperate, screaming best to crash past the gates and claw up the walls surrounding the garden. How could they? Dyer ordered the gates closed before ordering the firing. His aim, he would later declare stiffly and stolidly, was not to stop the assembly, but to punish the dreaded Indians. Stampeding crowds were surely and swiftly brought down by fusillade like partridges in flight. The fusillade didn't stop until the ammunition ran out. Women tried to save themselves by jumping into wells with their children. They couldn't. Death's angel in the form of a zealous English officer picked off each soul thrashing toward life. It was a massacre. This is actually a very important moment in the Indian independence struggle. Then I'm going to just skip a little bit, move on. About 20 years later, of course, another war breaks out. And during this war, there are a lot of foreign soldiers in Calcutta, and their lives get imbricated with the lives of my main characters, the Mitters and their dependents and their various entanglements, let's say. This is 1942, chapter 54. Yellow isn't a great color in this year, 1942. This is clear to Amherst Ishiru Buck, so-called American hero of the forgotten army of the Allies in the war to end all wars. Sergeant Buck does not want to die a hero's death. He's watched friends and fellows die those. In the Burmese forest, to distract himself, he invents whole fantasy futures with girls he's never met, girls who probably wouldn't choose him anyway. It's always been like that with him. He's always looked different, neither this nor that. But when shelling starts in the forests of Nupumga and there's nowhere to go from that impossible bluff of mountain, his company, the 2nd Battalion of the Marauders, has already been there 5 days. His heart begins to turn to ash, thinking he'll never be with a girl again at all. The Japanese are all around, shelling constantly, heavy casualties. Words that sound just like words until they happen around you. Never, too, is a word like a bullet with the range of infinity. What can it possibly mean? The 2nd Battalion's perimeter, 400 by 250 yards, on top of a 2,800-foot high saddle of ground that dominates the surrounding terrain, is filling with shit and gangrene. At night, the forest smells like the collective fear and rage of the men marooned on the bluff. That smell will never leave Amherst fully. Also, the smell of agony, longing, and vomit. The men sleep and wake fitfully or not at all. Their suffering feels like airlessness rather than pain. Then the Japs capture the waterhole. Then Amherst and a few others like him, yellow men, Americans with Asian mixed in, start to be sent out at dead of night to try and bring back water. The second time, Amherst's mate Sterling gets shot down. He has to leave Sterling, father's name Tanaka, mother American, old San Francisco family, at the hole. He just barely gets back himself. They don't talk about death, or about relief, or about home, or about girls, apple pie, or football games. By silent pact, among the many pacts that men fighting and dying together make with one another, they can no longer bear it. But there's nothing they can do. They have to bear it. They bear it. On the 9th morning, Amherst is keeping track of the days for no reason he can name. Robbie Mook points his index finger upward at the sky. Deakins, with a foot already turning a mottled marbled maroon from where he stepped on some shrapnel a few days ago, groans and rubs his eyes. Amherst will remember as if it's a movie he has watched. Though the sun is barely visible through the trees above, bits and pieces of a leaden sky can be seen, and the occasional plane cuts through the patchy gray-blue like a silver arrow. They've run out of water 2 days ago. The water hole is in the crosshairs of the Japanese, a few hundred feet away and below. And even if you slither to it like a worm, you risk getting a nice thwacking bullet in your noggin as you try to dip your makeshift water bag into the stinking, crusted water. Sterling and his maggots are keeping guard at the approach. Case in point, his body probably is still there. Has Sterling's blood mixed with the hole's water? Probably. And then Robbie says, look, fellas, look. He tries to buck upward, but can't. Keeps pointing up, though, looking as if he's giving the sky the wrong finger. Oh, pipe down, would ya? Someone a few bodies away grunts, and then the water bags start dropping. Planes like angels have brought relief. Manna has dropped from heaven. Robbie Mook is shuddering and weeping, rolling on the wet ground toward the bags as they fall. Stray Japanese bullets from below blow a few bags into silver showers. There's shouting and yee-hawing and whooping. There's sobbing and retching. Amherst can only think that Sterling won't be needing any water. He's quite dead. In a few minutes, the bags stop falling, the droning and the planes go away, but they're alive and it's morning and they know they might live at least another day. They are the company to be famous later as Merrill's Marauders. Howdy, goddammit. Some of them say they are the fighting Aggies. They say whoop a lot. Still alive on that hilltop, a bunch of men in raggedy clothes, stringy hair and dead eyes, dancing jigs and backslapping each other. And then on the 11th day, the 1st and 3rd battalions break through to them. They find broken men who have aged years, not days, during the siege. Lucky for Amherst and Robbie and Dickens, Sterling is just plain old dead. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Nandini, thank you so much. Your reading was so elegant. Your
Thank
voice is mesmerizing. The book is gorgeous. Blick, I know you want to say something. Can you unmute? Do you have any questions for Nandini?
Poor Blake.
I sense a question.
You sense, I'm just in awe. I mean, if my mouth is open, it's because I was just gasping air. I was just taking in and didn't want to take it out. It was so beautifully written. You know, it was the first thing that popped into my mind though, just as it started off in 1898, and that's in 1898, you talk about Indian history, but 1898 is the first war that the Trump family didn't participate in. So now, now it's been 123 years that no member of the Trump family has been in the military. So,
oh gosh.
So you're talking about all that Indian bloodshed and the shooting and everything. So
yeah,
extreme opposites.
I didn't know that, but that is so interesting. What war was it? The Crimea?
Spanish-American War.
Oh, the Spanish-American.
Yeah, it was a fabricated war too. It was as politically deceptive as the wars that you were, the battles, the colonialist battles that you were describing in your novel. Yeah.
Well, some things don't change, do they?
No.
The more things change, the more they say stay the same. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I find when I read about the history of the wars that the British had the Indians fight, it's how full they were of empty promises. And then in the end, Indians still had to fight their own anti-colonial struggle outside of fighting both in the First and the Second World Wars. For the British, I mean, millions of Indians fought in those wars, and they were never given any kind of recognition for that.
Yeah, the British even did that with the Armenians. They promised the Armenians after the First World War that they would fight for their sovereignty, and they made all the promises. And you know, if you scratch and sniff any place in history in the past couple hundred years, the stench of England, Great Britain, will always rise up, no matter what corner of the earth it is.
Totally agree, totally. It's so good to have a war buff here. I usually don't get them.
War buff.
That's why I knew I had to.
I mean, a war history buff, not a war buff. Sorry about that.
If anyone out there has any questions at all for Nandini or Blick, shoot them into the chat. Otherwise, you guys, Dominique has posted links to Blick's Route 66 and Nandini's Love's Garden, both on Facebook and on Zoom. Thank you to both of you so much. Sue had to jump. Thank you both so much for reading tonight. It was so lovely and elegant, and I know that our audience really enjoyed it. So I hope everyone has a great night. This will be archived on Facebook if you guys want to share it with your friends. And I hope everyone has a great evening, and see you in 2 weeks with David Bachner and Vicki Wicker. So everyone have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you. It was lovely to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Amy. Good night.